Welcome, friends, to another episode of Geekbike. This is Lightning P38. Most of you watching a recumbent video on YouTube is going to be very familiar with this bike. There's a million of them around, been produced quite a long time. Generally regarded as a pretty nice recumbent design. Has a lot of positive attributes, but I'm not really here to tell you all that. I'm going to cover just a few interesting things about the particular one I have. How I've accessorized it and things like that. Hopefully somebody out there will find this interesting. So I got this bike used a couple years ago, about 4 years ago maybe, and I think I probably put about a quarter of my miles on this bike. I tend to use it more so in the winter than in the summer. A couple reasons for that, which I'll get to. But yeah, it's pretty different from the rest of my bikes. All the rest of my bikes have laid back seats, high bottom brackets, all short wheelbase bikes, as you might imagine. Um, this one's much more upright, and that's both good and bad, depending on what we're talking about. But let's just talk about some of the things I've done with it. I got a little larger, got a 9-speed drivetrain on this bike. I got a little larger than average cassette on it. This is 40 teeth. I needed a little bit lower gear back here because I'm using shorter cranks. I'll get to that in a bit too. I had to use a road link, wolf tooth road link, to allow this X7 to work. Even with the B screw turned all the way in, I couldn't quite get it to shift reliably. Geometry of the derailleur just didn't quite permit it, but it works really well. Indexes perfectly, I dare say, with this setup. As you can see, I got fenders on this bike. Got some reflective tape back there. That's one of the reasons why I ride this bike more so in the winter. It's got fenders, and that's critical because it's messy around here. Since I'm at the back of the bike, I'll point out what kind of tires I use. I use Conti Grand Prix 5000s. Basically the fastest clincher out there, more or less, except for a couple specialty tires. I really like this tire. It's reliable. It's fast. I run latex tubes in this rear wheel here too. Just trying to eke out a little bit of speed. Generally, this is not a very fast bike. Even though I ride in very hilly terrain, it climbs very well. Overall, it's too unaerodynamic to be fast overall. But you know, you do what you can to, because I like to go fast. I mean, it's enjoyable. It's not every speed isn't everything, but it counts for something, that's for sure, in terms of the fun. So I do what I can where I can. Another thing I've done that some people notice right off the bat is I've got this lumbar pad here, just camping mat, and I do that just it's more comfortable for me to create a little more lumbar recurve. But what I've got right here is a 2-inch wide nylon strap, and it's secured with a very heavy aluminum buckle, and I get this thing as tight as I can. Basically what I would do is I'd get it wet, and I'd loop it around the bike and get it as tight as I could when it was wet, and as it dries it tends to shrink up and gets even tighter. So I do that because a lot of the seat on P38 is pretty darn soft, especially with this P38 style mesh instead of the phantom mesh. It's pretty damn springy, and I'd sink into it so bad that not only it was extending my reach to the pedals too much, because I'd push hard on the pedals and then I'd sink into the seat. There was risk of the mesh hitting the rear tire. Fender would solve that, but I still didn't like the fact that, you know, I was pushing on the fender, even pushing on the tire on really steep hills. So this strap actually did a couple things for me. Number one is it kept the mesh off the fender. Number two, it really seemed to provide a more stable platform to push against, and seemed to improve climbing efficiency. And third, it actually kind of reinforced the lumbar support I got out of this foam, and just provides a stronger or more resistant to collapse there, and just makes my back feel better, quite frankly. I even did something similar with camping mat under the bottom of the seat too, and it was mostly so I could create this cutout here. And that's really for, occasionally I'd get tailbone pain from sitting so upright on this bike. We'll get a little numb back there. And by putting this pad in with this cutout, that basically took care of that too. So, hey, seat comfort's important on a recumbent, and they almost always require a little bit of tweaking, modification, that sort of thing. Since I'm right here, see I got a TerraCycle idler that floats back here. I found that improved the noise on the bike. I was getting a little bit of noise out of the rear idler when I got it. I replaced the bearing in it, but then the noise came back a couple weeks later, so I'm not sure what the magic is there, but this one's been rock solid. It's worth every penny. I didn't bother with the front idler because it doesn't see much stress, and the one that's there is fine. I don't know if it goes someday, I'll put a TerraCycle there, but I'm not in a hurry to do that really at the moment. You can see I put different handlebars on the bike. These are Pachetta tweener bars. There's the shorter version of the narrow 18, I think it's 18.75 inches width. So they're pretty narrow bars. They're basically about as wide as the seat, about as wide as my shoulders too. So I find this position to be a little bit more comfortable than the stock bars that are on the bike. I think it even improved the handling a little bit too, because basically I kind of put my hands sort of right in this area, and you can see there's very little setback behind the steering axis. Coupled with the fact that the bars are pretty narrow means the tiller distance, or the radius of the arc my hand moves through as I steer, is pretty small. And on this particular bike, with the steering geometry that it has, which is pretty slack and has quite a bit of flop to it, I think the small amount of tiller really helps keep that under control. So I find that the handling is okay on this bike. Continuing with the front of the bike, I've got 145 millimeter cranks on this bike. I did that because, the P38 is such an upright seat that I felt the position was too closed for me. The short cranks help keep my knee away from my chest, basically, at the top of the pedal stroke. So I find that it's just a natural complement to put my body in the position I want it to be in. With longer cranks, I actually exacerbated the lower back discomfort that I felt on it. So, between the lumbar pad, the power strap I call it, and the shorter cranks, I'm actually quite comfortable on the bike now. And actually the handlebars too were part of it. I didn't really make totally clear that when I was talking about where my hands are, it puts my hands further away from my body too than with the standard handlebars. With the riser curving back, your hands are more back here, and that couple inches of extra reach allows my arms to be straighter. And for me personally, it's more comfortable that way. Also up here on the steering, I've got a mount for my Garmin. It's pretty much in the perfect spot, right in my face, but out of the way. Shifting, I got a set of triggers here mounted on the inside of the tweener bars. My knees don't come up any higher than about right here, so I don't really have any interference no matter how I'm steering. On the other side here, I've got a goofy arrangement with a right side Paul Thumbie and a right side shifter put into index mode, and using that to shift the front derailleur. Hey, I just got some parts and laying around. Why buy new stuff, right? Got a Bush & Mueller mirror, short stem mirror. I think this is perfect with these narrow bars. If I use something like a Zeffel spy mirror, the mirror was blocked by my body, my shoulders too much. I'm able to, with this stalk and angling it out a little bit, I'm able to get look over my shoulder much better, so that works out nice. I do get a tiny bit of vibration from the length of the stalk, but it's manageable most of the time. Coming up front here, I've got a one-arm bandit, Pachetta one-arm bandit light mount. This works really good. I did have to use a shim here to make it work. The bandit is meant for a 1 1/8 inch derailleur tube, but I think this is 3/4. But anyway, I got a rubber shim in there that allows it to work okay, and I think it even provides a little bit of damping. There is a very subtle bit of movement. I mean, you don't see it when riding. Seems to maybe even cut down on vibration on the light. So that kind of worked out nice. What else I got to say here? I've got some TRP 90 millimeter long cyclocross brakes, front and rear. I actually harvested them off of a different bike of mine that was not red, and so I guess I got a lot of red on this bike. Tires. I've got a Schwalbe Shredda Evo 40 millimeter up front. So all in all, I got a pretty fast set of tires on here. Like I said, though, the bike overall was a little bit on the slow side. When I'm on a very hilly ride, 100 feet of climbing per mile overall or more, it's about as fast as my more aero bikes that also climb very well, but it's not any faster climbing than those. And then it loses on the flats and the rolly parts, and the longer downhills too when I have those. So it's not my fastest bike, but it's kind of refreshing to ride in a more upright position at times. It does make those rides with lots of steep climbing in a way a little bit more enjoyable, because just because being laid back on really steep hills, when I say really steep, I'm saying 10, 12, 14%, that sort of thing, is physically a little bit uncomfortable, especially if we're talking long climbs. Around here, we've got climbs like that. It takes me 15, 20, 30 minutes to get up, depending on which one. And it's long enough that if you're really laid back, so all the blood rushes to your head, and it's not the most comfortable thing on that kind of length climb. This alleviates that issue. So all in all, I find it to be a nice addition to the stable. So I think I hit on all the interesting stuff here. If anybody's got any questions, ask away.